Title: The One Who was written year 110 million euro. Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the stone carved capital of Vareth, where scribes penned history to serve power and truth bent beneath the quill of comfort, there lived a man known only as the One Who was written. His name had once filled volumes. Now not even a whisper remained. They had removed him, struck from record, redacted from memory. But he remained. He wore no title, no legacy, just a cloak of parchment and ashes. He walked the boundary between market and temple, carving truth into stone walls in the language of fire. "You are not waiting," he told a weeping boy beneath the old archive. "You are building thunder beneath your feet." A flame that listens heard him that day, and the silence of Vareth began to tremble. Chapter 2. The Council of Ink ruled Vareth with calligraphy and consensus. They held truth hostage to comfort, rewriting the past, each cycle to suit the season. Painful events were labeled myth. Rebels were labeled storms. Bosses were erased like bad dreams. The flame that listens had once been their archivist, but now she bore scorched gloves and a voice hoarse from shouting into quiet rooms. With a rewritten, she traced the very history brick by brick, memory by scar. They lit small fires at first. Words returned to lips once sealed. Names reappeared on tombs. And then the people began to ask, what else was lost to comfort? Chapter 3. A festival approached the binding day, where each citizen offered a truth to be woven into the public scroll. This time, the scroll caught fire. The flame that listened stood on the archive steps and read aloud from the ash-clouded stones the rewritten's true past, and all the others buried with him. The council tried to hush her, but thunder echoed, footsteps gathered, and the One Who was written spoke not to accuse, but to remind. "We do not reclaim truth to punish," he said. "We reclaim it to live." By nightfall, the council chamber stood empty. By morning, its walls bore the phrase, "You are not waiting, you are building thunder beneath your feet." And Vareth learned to speak again. Title: The One Who Binds Threads. Year 109,871,794.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the fractured city of Keller, where walls were built faster than bridges and neighbors forgot the sound of each other's names, a figure moved through the alleys like a stitch pulling cloth back together, known only as the One Who Binds Threads. She carried no cape, no insignia, just a needle of light, and about to reconnect what fear had severed. Once a tailor, once a mother, now something more. Each night she mended more than garments, she mended feuds. A torn flag between factions, a ripped banner at a grieving shrine, cloaks shared between rivals. The measure of power lies not in what you survived, she whispered as she sewed two enemy crests into a single quilt, but in what you transformed. The uncrowned king took notice. Chapter 2. He had ruled Keller once not by crown, but by consent, until his generosity was branded as weakness, and his gifts were seized by those who mistook kindness for surrender. Now he wandered the city in disguise, watching it split into tighter and tighter pieces. When he found the thread binder, he asked, "Why do you waste time on scraps?" "Because scraps are stories," she replied, "and stories, when shared, hold more than walls ever could." Together, they hosted a gathering not in the center of the city, but on its forgotten edge. Each person brought something broken, and left with something shared. Chapter 3. As tensions rose, threats of conquest from outer districts, the threadbinder continued her quiet work. When raiders approached, they found not battlements, but banners strung between homes, quilts wrapped around children. Food passed without fear. They left without striking, because Keller had bound itself back together. Not by force, by fabric. The uncrowned king stood before the people, not to reclaim a throne, but to offer a seat at the table to all. And above the main square, stitched in gold across a canopy woven from thousands of hands, one phrase shimmered: "The measure of power lies not in what you survived, but in what you transformed." Title: The Grief Singer. Year 109,743,589.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the Valley of Rinth, where rain never fell, but rivers still wept, a lone figure wandered, singing to the bones of the forgotten. Her voice trembled with sorrow, but behind it thrummed a power no blade could match. She was the grief singer. Where she passed, silence followed not from fear, but from reverence. Rinth was a land of conflict veiled in quiet. The rulers claimed peace, yet injustice festered beneath gilded law. Grief was illegal, mourning suppressed, harmony was measured in stillness, not in truth. Then the thorned embrace returned a long-exiled rebel, whose heart beat louder than the kingdom's fear. He found the grief, singer among the graves. "Why do you sing?" he asked. "Because invincibility," she said, "is born in vulnerability." Chapter 2. They traveled together through the muted lands, reviving forbidden stories. A child who cried for her mother's chains, a lover who carved justice into trees, a teacher who taught resistance with lullabies. The grief singer gave them songs. The thorn embrace gave them courage. As words spread, mourners stepped into the streets. They lit candles. They chanted names long struck from the census. The Council of Tranquility declared it treason. The duel moved underground, but where grief was sung, strength bloomed. Chapter 3. When the council issued the order of suppression, the people of Rinth did not run. They sang, in gardens, in courts, in prisons. The grief singer led the chorus. The thorn embrace tore down the execution platform and turned it into a stage. Guards laid down arms. The chancellor wept for the first time in decades. Not from fear, from recognition. Rinth changed not through conquest, but confession. And on the edge of the valley, where her last song echoed into wind-carved stone, the great singer left one line. Invincibility is born in vulnerability. And the world sang back. Title: The Unmarked Grave. Year: 109,615,384.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Beyond the worm-spine mountains, across dunes that whispered of fallen empires, lay the oracle of shifting sands. Her temple was not carved of stone, but built from wind, a place that appeared only when silence was obeyed. To reach her, one had to do less, not more. Many failed, but the unmarked grave succeeded, not by fighting, but by pausing. He had once been a general, then a fugitive, then forgotten altogether. No statue bore his name, no scroll his deeds. Yet still he walked, driven by a feeling that something in the world needed stillness more than a sword. The most transformative act, the oracle told him, is often to do less, but with full presence. Chapter 2. A kingdom torn by overreach and haste now teetered on collapse. The Council of Flame, desperate to preserve its hold, enacted new laws daily, scattering effort like seed into salt. The grave returned to his homeland, not with banners, but with quiet. He sat in market squares, listened to disputes, and in the gardens. When chaos broke out in the city, he walked calmly through the streets, holding a single cup of water to share with anyone who would drink. People began to follow, not in awe, in relief. They called him the gentle anchor. The oracle watched from afar. Chapter 3. When the council demanded submission, the great made no speech. He simply invited them to the field where families now gathered for shared meals, exchanged tools, planted trees. The council said soldiers. The soldiers laid down their arms. They saw no threat, only rhythm, only presence. The grave took no power. He merely stayed, and slowly the kingdom reshaped not by decree, but through deliberate pause, shared breath, and a returned attention to what mattered. The oracle's temple faded again, but in the capital center, a stone was placed with no name. On it, a single line. The most transformative act is often to do less, but with full presence. Title: The Hand of Renewal. Year: 109,487,179.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Meredith, where crime ran as deep as the stole, carved aqueducts and loyalty could be purchased by the hour. Trust was a ghost spoken of, never seen, but somewhere between the forgeries and the back alley verdicts, a woman known as the Hand of Renewal walked with nothing to offer but honesty. She had once been the kingdom's most skilled forger. Then she vanished. Now she returned, not to rewrite the law, but to illuminate it. Her name was feared by crooks and clerics alike, not because she punished, but because she reminded. One night in the hidden court beneath the smuggler's arch, she said to a rising thief, "The fiercest rewards are forged in the furnace of your greatest challenges." He laughed, and then followed her. Chapter 2. The one who binds threads. A former rebel turned healer had sewn together what violence had broken. Together with the Hand, they walked the corridors of crime not as warriors, but as anchors. The Hand offered deals not in gold, but in truth. Admit what you've done. Ask what you still want. Own what you are. It was terrifying, but it worked. A blackmailer confessed to his victims, then offered restitution. Counterfeiter revealed his secrets, then taught them to schools. One by one, the city's underworld turned, not soft, but sane. Chapter 3. The magistrate demanded her arrest. "You threaten stability," he said. "No," she replied. "I reveal its foundation." The people defended her, not with blades, with stories, with names, with gratitude. The trial became a festival. the festival for reckoning. The magistrate resigned. The city changed, and where the gallows once stood now grows a garden. At its center, etched into the base of the fountain shaped like clasped hands, the fiercest rewards are forged in the furnace of your greatest challenges. And Marinf learned the integrity, once planted, roots deeper than fear. Title: The Starbound Pilgrim. Year: 109,358,973.9. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. In the observatory ruins a sailor, beneath skies too clouded to read, and a dome cracked like an ancient egg, the starbound pilgrim stood. She had spent decades chasing a constellation that no longer moved one's head to reveal one's truest self, one mirrored in still water, but no lake reflected truth in sailor anymore. So she carried the stars within. Others called her mad or holy, but she never corrected them. Her silence unnerved many, especially the Bloomwalker, who once led the city's cult of color, but now wandered in monochrome. He asked her once, "Why do you never speak?" She only met his gaze and thought, "Your silence is not absence, it is thunder resting in the breath before its roar." He heard it anyway. Chapter 2. The city had abandoned its ideals in exchange for comfort. Its leaders wore masks of virtue and traded principles like currency. People forgot why they gathered, prayed, danced. But the pilgrim remembered. She returned each year to the same crumbling plaza, lighting a single flame beneath the statue of a forgotten philosopher. No speech, no invitation, just presence. This year the Bloomwalker followed. He stood beside her, lit a second flame. Word spread. More came not to protest, but to remember. Chapter 3. When the council demanded an end to the unsanctioned ritual, the pilgrim knelt, not in surrender, in reverence. The Bloomwalker raised his voice for the first time in a decade. "You built this city on truth," he told them, "and now it echoes louder in silence than in your decrees." They laughed, but the people did not. They gathered again the next night, and the next. The stars began to shine again, not in the sky, but in their choices, and on the shattered dome of Siler, now restored as a temple of listening. A line of silver glass reads, "Your silence is not absence, it is thunder resting in the breath before its roar." Title: The Leviathan of Longing. Year: 109,230,769.1. Year: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. The orbital city of Heliox hung suspended in the upper stratosphere, a gleaming ring of chrome and protocol drifting above the war-scarred earth. Here, in the sanctuary of the elite, time was controlled literally. Clocks obeyed council orders. Aging could be paused. Memory could be trimmed. And into this world of curated perfection returned the Leviathan of Longing. A former astro-temporal engineer turned, myth after, she vanished into unspace. She returned not with vengeance, but with stillness. She said nothing. She carried only a compass that pointed inward, and with her came the laugh that breaks chains. A rogue chronologist whose disruptive humor had once short-circuited a vault. "Time never stops," the Leviathan said, "but stillness can reveal the path." Chapter 2. The elites of Heliox had abolished responsibility. Systems made decisions. Algorithms assigned worth. Consequences were deferred until they could be managed. But the Leviathan began asking questions. Who calibrates the system? Who benefits when no one is blamed? Who remembers what was lost? No one answered, so she stopped time, literally, for 1 hour. All of Heliox froze. And in the silence, every person was alone with their thoughts. Not fed, not filtered, just themselves. The laugh that breaks chains stood atop the broadcast dome and laughed. "Now we begin," she said. Chapter 3. People woke changed. A technician confessed to falsifying maintenance logs. A minister relinquished his immunity clause. Students shared forbidden historical records. Truth unfurled like a solar sail. The Leviathan did not punish. She held mirrors. When the council tried to restore the old order, they found the infrastructure disassembled not by sabotage, but by choice. Responsibility had returned, not as burden, as purpose. Heliox descended, not in shame, in solidarity, and on the surface, beneath its landing spire, a single phrase was etched into glass visible from orbit. "Time never stops, but stillness can reveal the path." Title: The Lightning Shepherd. Year: 102,563.7. Year: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac series, 2025. Chapter 1. The winds of Corvin carry stories like sparks, rumors of famine. Failed trees and fields that refuse to bloom. At the edge of the highlands, the lightning shepherd wandered alone, a crooked staff in one hand and thunder following close behind. Once a general, Once a traitor, now only a guide for those who still believed unity could mend what pride had fractured. His companion was the bone scribe, an archivist who etched memories into the bones of the fallen, not for sorrow, but so the living could learn. You must first conquer yourself, the shepherd often muttered. Then the world kneels differently. Corfin had knelt too often to the wrong causes. Chapter 2. The 6 clans of the valley had splintered after the drought of 9 suns. Once bound by a single oath, they now built borders out of silence. Each believed the others hoarded rain, cheated trade, or worse, colluded with sky spirits to steal time itself. The lightning shepherd visited them one by one, not to beg or barter, but to remember. He spoke of shared storms, shared bread, shared fear. The bone scribe followed silently, etching the renewed words into polished scapulae. A young hunter asked, "What makes you think unity is still possible?" "Because I've already broken everything else," the shepherd replied. "Now I rebuild." Chapter 3. When the sky cracked with the fury of a storm unseen 2 generations passed in, rivers overflowed, homes collapsed. The clans cried out for gods, for guardians, for luck. They got the shepherd. He stood in the floodplain, arms wide, staff aloft. Lightning struck, but bent around him like respect. The bone scribe recorded it all. Then came the moment of choice. 6 clans, 6 leaders, 6 weapons drawn. The shepherd knelt. "I am not your enemy," he said, "but I will stand between you if I must." None struck. Instead, they lowered their blades and raised their voices. A pact was written that night, not on paper, but in mud, rain, and blood, and above the new council hall, a carving reads, "You must first conquer yourself, then the world kneels differently." Title: The Shattered Healer. Year: 108,974,358.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the city of Brilthane, famed for its mere towers, echo tribunals, and quarterly celebrations of personal triumph, there was only one crime: failure. And for that, the punishment was reflection. Literally, you were sealed in a mirrored room until you repented, or applauded your own downfall. The shattered healer had once been Brilthane's pride. Her hands gifted in curing ailment, conflict, and boredom. But when she saved a peasant boy with a banned herb instead of the stake, the proved elixir, she was deemed ethically unstable. She was cast into reflection, and from that exile emerged the memory without a host, an old friend turned bureaucratic ghost who now carried truth in riddles and paperwork misfiled on purpose. Together they returned not to restore Brilthane, but to mock it into awakening. Chapter 2. The healer gave no grand speeches. She opened a free clinic. She treated everyone: failed artists, banished accountants, citizens with confidence deficiencies. Her tools: humor, compassion, and mirrors she carried on her back with cracks already drawn. Each patient left with 2 questions. What does the city expect of you? And what do you actually want? The memory without a host roamed the administrative towers, slitting poems into compliance manuals and drawing cartoons in medical tax codes. The city laughed, then asked why they had ever stopped. Chapter 3. The Chancellor of Self-Supremacy called for her second exile. Instead, the city held a roast of leadership. The healer was the keynote. She read a prescription aloud for Brilthane itself. Less applause, more listening, fewer mirrors, more windows. The Chancellor resigned amid the laugh, and no one replaced him, because Brilthane learned that balancing the self with the whole was funnier and truer than worshipping perfection. On the walls of reflection, now converted into a public art gallery, a plaque reads, "Self-revelation often waits in the aftermath of the fall." And the city finally stood, a little less shiny, but far more whole. Title: The Whisper of Shame. Here: 108,546,183.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the marble city of Verust, where everyone knew everything about everyone else except, of course, what mattered, lived a man named Pith. Pith was not a philosopher or a king. He was a listener, licensed, badged, and unionized. His job? To attend weekly parliaments of noise, where shouting citizens performed their complaints to the beat of civic drums. Each voice demanded to be heard louder than the last. It was, supposedly, democracy. Enter the Whisper of Shame. She arrived mid-session, dressed in rags stitched from courtroom transcripts, dragging behind her a scroll titled Receipts. She didn't speak. She only sighed, and Ferris miraculously paused. Growth does not come from the struggle alone, she said at last, but from the courage to learn what it offered. Chapter 2. The Parliament recoiled. "Is she being sincere?" asked a merchant, visibly sweating. "I think so," whispered a noblewoman. "It's horrifying." The chain-breaker, an old rebel now employed as chief custodian of social niceties, took notice. He had once shouted truth. into the face of empires. Now he cleaned up after public debates. He followed the whisper to the plaza, where she began asking questions no one wanted answered. Who taught you to interrupt, but never inquire? What do you owe the person you mock? Why do you debate like it's dodgeball? A baker fainted. A poet blushed. A chainbreaker smiled. Chapter 3. Together they introduced an outrageous idea. The mutual respect mandate. It involved listening, taking turns, and guest changing one's mind when proven wrong. Protests erupted. She wants to kill freedom of speech, cried a juggler. No, she replied, just the noise pretending to be it. Gradually, Parliament evolved, not into serenity, but into actual dialogue. Citizens disagreed, then shook hands. If retired, finally able to nap, Chainbreaker took up quilting, and above the entrance to Parliament, a plaque now reads, "Growth does not come from the struggle alone, but from the courage to learn what it offered." The whisper of shame was never seen again, but every time someone truly listens, a sigh is heard on the wind. Title: The Shepherd of Regret. Here, 108,717,948.5 Era, Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the peculiar township of Fumblebrook, where sidewalks zigzagged without warning, and every fourth Tuesday was declared opposite day by civic decree, failure wasn't just expected. It was celebrated. The reigning title holder of most glorious collapse was the Shepherd of Regret, a farmer, philosopher turned sock vendor whose trees on ethical footwear had accidentally sparked a short-lived sock rebellion. His partner in penance was the spirit midwife, who claimed she could coach ghosts through their emotional baggage and help them move on with interpretive dance if needed. Together they embarked on the most ambitious mission yet. Kindness, not the heroic kind, the silly, inconvenient, help-rabbit. Tight-knits, shoes kind, because, as the shepherd often muttered between failed shoe fittings, lessons born from failure often outlive the celebration of a win. Chapter 2. They began with mismatched gloves left on benches, compliments written in invisible ink activated by tea spills, and once, an unsolicited ukulele concert outside a dental office. Fumblebrook was confused, then intrigued, then unexpectedly inspired. A curmudgeonly cobbler gave away his last 10 boots, while Prankster began leaving encouraging post-it notes in City Hall's complaint box. The mayor publicly admitted she never understood taxes and people forgave her. The town's laughter tripled. So did its empathy. Chapter 3. A group of humorless bureaucrats from neighboring Efficientia tried to intervene. They delivered cease and desist orders in triplicate. The shepherd responded by folding his into a paper llama and teaching it to tango. The spirit midwife choreographed an entire opera title, Permit Me to Care, in C minor. Efficientia retreated in bureaucratic confusion. Fumblebrook held its first kindness is contagious, but not invasive parade, and in the newly planted garden of glorious failures, a bench bears the following plaque. Lessons born from failure often outlive the celebration of a win, and that's why the Shepherd of Regret now sells ethically misbuttoned jackets on purpose. Title: The Dreamweaver. Year: 108,589,743.2 Era, Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadow-wrapped village of Breemore, where night fog kissed every rooftop and memory clung to clothes like dust, lived a woman known as the Dreamweaver. Her hands spun tapestries from whispers and old grief. Each thread was a story, each pattern a plea. She never dreamed for herself, only for others. At the edge of the village, a quiet man tended fallow fields that refused to grow. They called him the unmade tiller, once a farmer of kings, now broken by a war that left him alive, but forgotten. He watched the weaver work, night after night, until one fog-heavy dusk she left a gift on his doorstep, a tapestry of a man holding a broken plow in one hand, and a rising sun in the other. "A show your wounds is not shamed," it read, it is prophecy. Chapter 2. When a militia rolled through Breemore, seeking labor and loyalty, fear spread faster than fire. The elders hid their stories. The youth offered silence. The leaders prepared lists of the strong and silent. The unmade tiller stood instead. "I cannot lift what I once did," he said, "but I will not kneel again." The weaver stepped beside him. "Then you shall not stand alone." One by one, others joined, not with weapons, with truth. They held a festival, not of defiance, but remembrance. Tapestries were hung in the square, each person's story, scar and sorrow woven beside their neighbors. The militia kept and arrived, and found no targets, only community. Chapter 3. The tiller taught the children how to tend soil with care, not force. The weaver stitched names of the fallen into quilts gifted freely to those who once feared to grieve. Love bloomed, not in secret, but in sunrise walks and shared hands over tea. When the next army came, they passed through without harm. They saw the village, not as a threat, but as something unbreakable, not because it was hidden, because it was whole. And on the main square's fountain, below the tapestries now protected by law, was etched one line: "To share your wounds is not shame, it is prophecy." Title: The Shadow Whisperer. Year: 108,461,538.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the wind-cracked town of Dustmere, where water was rarer than gossip and shade had been privatized by corporate decree, survival was considered a luxury subscription service. Enter the Shadow Whisperer. He didn't own land. He didn't drink branded hydration pellets. He didn't even pay sunlight tax. But he listened to sand, to trees, to shadows cast by objects long demolished. His unlikely companion was the name-buried insult, a former bureaucrat turned whistleblower whose identity was erased after suggesting maybe, just maybe, the last natural spring shouldn't be paved into a luxury skate park. "You don't need to know everything," the whisper told her, "just enough to stay curious." Chapter 2. The Ministry of Sustainable Extraction, whose motto was conservation through consumption, had declared that natural resources were too fragile to be trusted with the public, so they kept them behind filters, in vaults, on posters. The Shadow Whisperer countered with his own campaign. Invisible graffiti. He etched secrets into the backs of ration cards, mapped surviving root systems onto pizza boxes, buried fresh seeds in soil labeled excess dust disposal. The name Buried in Salt hosted a fake corporate seminar titled Maximizing Desert Yield, and ended it by planting a cactus on the boardroom table. Applause followed, and a few arrests. Chapter 3. Dustmere laughed harder, then asked questions, then followed the whisperer into the forgotten green zones. They found shade, water, a squirrel. It became a movement. The ministry panicked and declared a state of compulsory celebration. But too late. The people no longer believed. And on the cracked wall of the old extraction plant, now overtaken by vines and peppered with mushrooms, the sign glows faintly in phosphorescent ink. "You don't need to know everything, just enough to stay curious." Dustmere was no utopia, but it was alive and curious, and that was enough.